Hi everyone, I'm Bria. In this video, I'm going to be going over the 14 books I read in January, so let's jump right in. The first book I read was Born of Blood and Ash, which is the fourth in the Flesh and Fire series, which is a completed series by Jennifer Armentrout. And I read this from January 1st to 5th and gave this 5 stars, and this is one of my favorite series and worlds and authors ever, and female main characters and main male characters slash book boyfriends. So I feel like I've mentioned this book in like every video or almost all of them so far, and that is why. And I believe this came out in August, and I reread the first 3 then and was going to start the 4th. However, I didn't quite feel emotionally prepared to read it and to finish the series, so I kept putting it off. But at the start of this year, January 1st, I felt compelled to pick it up and start the year off strong. So here are some of my thoughts. I already said part of this, but one of my favorite authors, series, female main characters, and main male characters ever, but my least favorite book of the series, mainly because I knew what was coming and there weren't any big surprises. So again, this is one of my favorite worlds, which means there's another series set in this world as well, and it is the From Blood and Ash series, and it's not completed. However, it is set in time after this one, so there is some information or like some spoilers because of that. And even with those spoilers, this series is actually my favorite of the 2, which doesn't typically happen. I feel like when there's 2 series set in like conjoining or like separate but chronological order, I usually like the second one more. It's not often that I end up liking the first one. The only other series that comes to mind is the City of Bones series, and I think it's the Clockwork Angel series or Clockwork something series that's set in time before that, and I didn't quite like that one as much, but I know there's been a few others like that. So this was surprising to me that this one was my favorite. And even with those spoilers and this technically being like my least favorite book of the series, it is still a 5-star book for me. And then I also love how the author writes Sarah's point of view and how she can make a single moment last several pages and me not even realize. I struggle to explain this, but the writing, it's very descriptive, and there is a lot of world building, but it's not always descriptive in the world building sense. It's often like descriptive in the character's point of view sense, like talking through what they're thinking and how they're coming to their decisions or how they're impacted by information that's just revealed. So I feel like she does that, or the author writes it in a very like compelling way, and I feel like I eat it up every time, and that's a big reason why this is one of my favorite female main characters ever. So I was very happy to start off my year with Born of Blood and Ash, and then second I read Visions of Flesh and Blood, which is actually a compendium. It's set in the world of the Flesh and Fire and Blood and Ash series, again by Jennifer Armentrout. And I did give this one, or actually I should say first, I read this from the 5th to the 5th in one day, and I gave this 3.5 stars. I did end up skipping part of it. Let me share my thoughts. So it's a compendium of mostly character descriptions slash overviews of their journeys, plus a few extra scenes, mostly of Miss Willa though, which is a secondary character. And so I did put that I liked her point of view. However, I skipped over the Flesh and Fire descriptions and overviews since I just read that book. However, I did read all of the From Blood and Ash ones, and I felt like they were a great refresher for the 6th book that's going to be coming out in June. So I may read those again right before that if I don't want to reread the first 5 books, although I feel like I may end up reading the first 5 books again because it is one of my favorite series. And then the last thought I put was just that I don't feel like it's worth paying for. I purchased this through like Apple Books when it first came out, and I didn't even realize it was a compendium. I don't think I read the description, but I feel like I don't want to say that I like regret it because it was a while ago, and like what's done is done. Like that money is gone. But I feel like if I saw it now, I don't know that I would pay for it again. So if it's on like Kindle Unlimited or you have some way to get free access, I think it's worth a read, but just know that it is a compendium. And if you've recently read one or both of the series, it's not quite necessary, although there are some nice bonus scenes, but they're not like plot driven. It's just like a little bit more information and time that you get to spend with the characters. And then moving right along, the third book I read was Murtagh, which is set in the world of The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. So the Inheritance Cycle follows one main character, Eragon, and then Murtagh as a secondary character. And so this is the first in a new series, or I'm assuming it's a new series, but it does end like in a way that alludes that there will be a series. And I read this from the 6th to the 7th and gave this 4.5 stars. And let me share my thoughts. All I really wrote was -0.5 rating because the thriller / cult vibes freaked me out. So it did read more like a thriller to me, whereas the Eragon series I would classify as like traditional fantasy, not even fantasy romance. I think it has like a hint of romance, and same as Murtagh, it has like a hint of future romance, but it really did read more as like a thriller or like a fantasy thriller. And there was a cult. I don't love that. I don't love reading thrillers because they're hard for me to put down and take a break from. And I feel like I do love when I start reading a book that's hard for me to put down, but when it's a thriller or something that's like a little scary to me, it's like not a great feeling. I don't know. I just don't love the feeling of, I don't know, just that it gives me. And I remember I read this a lot faster than I thought I would because I was reading it one night and I was like trying to get to the end because I was like, I need to resolve this before I go to sleep or else I'm not going to be able to sleep. And I don't think I ended up finishing it, but I got to a point where they were like the final like push for them to somewhat resolve things. So I was able to put it down and fall asleep okay. But I think just overall not a thriller fan. That being said, The Inheritance Cycle with Eragon was one of my favorite books growing up. And I feel like it's one of the few true Dragon Rider books, at least that I've read. Like I feel like I haven't come across many. The only other one that comes to mind is Fourth Wing. I do come across a lot of books that have like flying creatures or some sort of flying, but in terms of like a traditional dragon rider, I don't feel like I've read many of those. If you have any recommendations, let me know. But I think at least for now, this will always be one of my favorite series and worlds. Even though I prefer a little bit more romance now, I feel like I can't be picky since there are so few books that have dragon riders that are written very well, I should say. I do recommend this book though. I would just go into it knowing that it does have a cult, and then I also highly recommend the Inheritance Cycle series starting with Eragon. However, just make sure if you are a big fan of romance, just know that that's not really prevalent, although it is still an amazing series with a lot of great world building. And then next I read The Empire of Flame and Thorns from the 8th to the 9th and gave this 5 stars. This is the Flame and Thorns series, and the second one is coming out on the 24th actually, which is this month. And it's by Marion Blackwood. So I actually read, I think, 8 books by this author in January. I found this one first and loved it, gave it 5 stars. And then I started another series of hers and did not quite like it as much. I do want to look a little bit more into her works, and I didn't look at any of the dates, but I'm thinking that the series I read after was perhaps one of the first series she wrote. So I do want to look into like some of her more recent releases because I did love The Empire of Flame and Thorns. So let me share my thoughts. So I put amazing banter, fighting, steam, and sex scene, and think we'll get even better. And then good world building, and think will expand in the next book. So this book was set mostly in one location, which was a castle. However, at the end of the book, they do leave that location. So I think the world will naturally expand because of that. And then I put love the female main character's point of view and journey so far. And then I put, this might be a slight spoiler, but I'm glad they're still enemies because I love when it continues to the second book. So this is enemies to lovers, and they do like start to get along more towards the ending of the book. However, something else happens and it ends on a cliffhanger, which puts them back into that enemy space, which enemies to lovers is one of my favorite like tropes, and I often pick up books that are specifically enemies to lovers, and I do love when they don't quite become lovers in the first book, because a lot of times if it's like a multiple book series, and they get together by the end of book 1, I sometimes feel like what else is gonna happen or what else needs to happen? Like they can just have their happily ever after right now. So I do love it when it continues into the second book. So I loved reading this, and I was super glad to find a new 5-star book and author this soon in the year. And then, like I said, I did start the second series by her, and I will say it's still a good series, and I feel like I have read so much that I know what I love and I know what I don't like as much. So if you haven't read as much, or if you have slightly different opinions from me or anything like that, you could like this a lot more. So I do recommend it, and I will share a few of my thoughts, but I don't want to get like too negative about this. But I'll just go through I think it's 8 of the books, or maybe 7. It's 7 of them. So it's the Court of Elves series, and it starts with The Traitor's Spy, and then it's The Wicked Betrayal, The Beautiful Liar, The Fire Soul, The Lethal Deception, The Desperate Gamble, and The Last Stand. I do love that title structure, and I read the first one on the 9th, second on the 10th, third on the 10th. That doesn't seem right. That seems like it should be the 11th. Yeah. And then the next one on the 12th, next on the 13th, next on the 14th, and then the last one on the 14th/15th. So these were all relatively short. I feel like they could be combined like into 3 or 4 books. And my ratings do reflect that, because I feel like there's only so much depth you can go into in one short book, and especially the way that this author structured it. Like there was a conflict that occurred every book, and then part of it was solved, not the entire conflict, but like a good part of it was solved, and then sometimes like something else would come up at the end of the book, or it would just reveal more about like this ongoing conflict. So I feel like for her to give us that little piece of closure at the ending of each book, like it's hard to go that into depth when you only have so many pages. So I give the first 4 stars, and then 4.5, 3.5, 3, 3's all the way till the end. And so again, I just want to share like a couple of my thoughts. So there was a lot of promise between the female main character and the main male character in the first book. However, it didn't progress quite as much as I wanted to. I feel like they had like good banter and dialogue at the start, but then when they got together, it kind of fizzled out in a way. I think the last book starts to get like a little bit better, but I will say it is like a Fade to Black book, which isn't my favorite, and I feel like the level of the banter didn't match that choice. So I didn't personally love that, but if you do prefer Fade to Black, then you may actually really love this series. And then I mentioned that the conflict, or part of the conflict, is usually resolved by the end of the book, and another repetition is that there was always a plot twist at the end of the book, and I feel like the author was good at writing those. However, after like the second or third book, I came to expect it at the end of every book, so it sort of like lost the shock factor, and some of the plot twists like still surprised me, but didn't really have that like wow effect since I knew it was coming. And then there are a few more repetitions, like little things like the female main character often pulls the main male character in by his shirt, and so there were just like things like that where I feel like, and I believe I mentioned this in my previous video, but I feel like when an author sometimes finds a book structure that works for them, they stick with that, and I get that to a certain extent. However, I feel like when there start to be a lot of repetitions in structure or moments or like words, I feel like I pick up on those pretty easily, and I don't necessarily love them. So if you do read this series, just know that it's going to be somewhat repetitive. However, I will say it was nice to finish because it was a longer series, so I feel like I got that like sense of accomplishment being able to start and finish a series. I have so many series that are ongoing and that I'm waiting for next releases, and sometimes it's nice to just like finish something and put it down. And I will also say, so the books are easy to read and not super high stakes, or like not written in a way that feels high stakes, which I think can be enjoyable. However, for me personally, I prefer longer books with more world building and more conflict and more high stakes. So I think that's probably a big reason why I didn't necessarily love this series, but I would say overall that it's good, not great, and not amazing. And then moving along to some better news, I reread Fourth Wing, so I think this was like the third or no, it would have been the fourth time I read it, because when I first found it, I read it twice, and then I think a few months went by, and then Iron Flame came out, so I read it again then, and then I read it again before Onyx Storm came out. So I read this from the 15th to the 19th and gave it 5 stars. This is the Empyrean series, and it has 3 books so far, and I thought I saw recently that someone said it's going to be a 5-book series. For some reason, I thought Onyx Storm was the last one, so when I started it, I realized about maybe 30 or 40% of the way through that I was not going to get my happily ever after, so I was a little disappointed, but I was also like, I don't know where I got that thought from. So I gave all 3 of these 5 stars. Again, I read this one from the 15th to the 19th, and then Iron Flame from the 19th to the 21st, and then Onyx Storm came out the 21st, and I read it to the 25th, and then because of the ending, I immediately felt like I needed to read it again, so I started it again, I believe on the 26th, and then I'm still reading it. Let me find what page I'm on. I'm reading it on my Kindle, and I'm on page 1624 of 1995. And then I also wanted to show y'all, I got the special edition or the limited edition from Target. I went to 3 different Targets on 3 different days, and then I also went to a Barnes & Noble before I was able to find this one, and I'm so happy I was when I found it. There were only 2 left on the shelf, so I think I really just happened to time it perfectly. I am very excited that I was able to eventually get one, and I've been reading it again on my Kindle because I've mostly been reading at night, but I do want to get some reading done on this actual book. I might have to read it a 3rd time sometime soon for that. So let me share my thoughts. So this is another series where it's one of my favorite books, female main characters and main male characters ever. I love the world building and setting, especially the competitions, sparring, and school setting. I always love when there's a female main character that either already knows how to fight or learns how to fight. It's very enjoyable. And then I also I love the female main character's journey to becoming stronger physically, and that she's already strong / badass mentally. So even though she had some growth to do physically, she still is very smart and ruthless in a way, which I love. And then for Iron Flame, I will say this is hard for me, but I think I would say Fourth Wing is my favorite of the 3 so far, and then Onyx Storm, and then Iron Flame, and I will share why. But first, let me share my thoughts with Iron Flame. This is the 2nd time I read this, and I did enjoy the reread more. The first time I got a lot of the secondary characters and dragons confused, and I got a little tired of the main male characters fighting over their communication. And the 2nd time I still felt those things a little bit, but not quite as much. And this is why I prefer Fourth Wing over Iron Flame and Onyx Storm. And I hesitate to even share this because these are 5-star books for me. However, there are a lot of secondary characters, and it's hard to keep all of them straight in my head. And they seem all important, or they're often interacting with the main characters, so I feel like I need to remember who they are. So I just wish she would take out half of those, but that's really my only complaint. And then I haven't done my thoughts for Onyx Storm yet. I was waiting to finish it again before sharing, but I don't want to share too much because I don't want to give any spoilers. But I would definitely either reread the first 2 or get a character refresh or something like that. I think that can make your experience a little bit more better, although I did reread them and still felt a little lost. That being said, like I said with Murtagh, it's one of the few series that I've read that have true dragon riders and that's written very well, and this one has romance in it, so I would even rank this, I guess I should probably wait until it's finished, but I feel like I would rank this above the Inheritance Cycle Eragon series because of that, although I'm not quite sure. And then I did do a little page in my bullet journal and I ranked my favorite reads of the month. I put number 1, Onyx Storm, number 2, Born of Blood and Ash, and number 3, Fourth Wing. I know I just said that Fourth Wing is my favorite book of this series, and I'm a little conflicted about that, but I feel like Onyx Storm was my favorite read of the month because it was new and it was a continuation of the story, but I feel like if I'm ranking them just overall, I still think I would rank it Fourth Wing, Onyx Storm, and then Iron Flame. So overall, a great month of reading and a wonderful start to the year. So if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm and I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for watching this video and I'll see you on the next one. And always remember that you're pure magic.